Dino Soups here, and today for our book review we're going to be looking at L'étranger, or The Stranger. Alright, now before I read this book I actually knew nothing about Camus, but now that I have, I'm glad that I did, because one, Camus is my new favorite philosopher, and this book is actually a good introduction to his thoughts. Now before we go into The Stranger, let's talk a bit about Camus. Alright, if all the other nihilistic philosophers were like this guy, then Camus like the cooler Daniel. Alright, Camus is often described as being a handsome figure. He had ladies on ladies, dog. He was sick.
He's sexy.
And if I could describe his views in like one sentence, it's that he saw the world as absurd. But he decided instead to embrace the absurd. Life is absurd, shit happens, but to that Camus would just say, fuck it, whatever. Let's get on with it. Okay, maybe Camus wouldn't have said that, but here's a quote from L'étranger that basically would have summed up that same sentiment. For the first time in that night alive with signs and stars, I opened myself to the gentle indifference of the world. Finding it so much like myself, so like a brother, really, I felt that I had been happy. Il me restait à souhaiter qu'il y a beaucoup de spectateurs le jeu de mon exécution et qu'ils m'accueillent avec des cris de haine. So it's around this point in the story where Meursault is facing death row, and even while proclaiming the absurdity of the world, he's still saying that he embraces cries of hate. You know, just, I'll take it.
Bruh.
YOLO? My God, Camus invented that. Living like Larry, more like living like Camus, as in killing people and going to jail and facing the guillotine. That's not how Camus actually died. That would be Meursault, but Camus also died in a pretty absurd manner. On his way back to Paris after a vacation in Provence, Camus died in the passenger seat after the driver, his friend, and also his nephew's publisher lost control of the car and crashed into a tree. His philosopher rival, which I didn't know philosophers had rivals, but they do, his philosopher rival Jean-Paul Sartre even said of Camus' death that it was a scandal because it suddenly projects onto the center of our human world the absurdity of our most fundamental needs. Alright, now let's go back to L'étranger and our boy Meursault. The book opens up with these two interesting lines. It reads, Aujourd'hui ma mère est morte, ou peut-être hier, je ne sais pas. Doesn't even care that his mom died. This is brought up later on in the story, but we'll get back to that. I want to talk about how he describes the setting as this very dull thing. Everything to him is dull. Everything about life is dull, except for women, which, now that I'm saying it out loud, kind of makes sense. It's probably a reflection of Camus. All right, here, look at him describe the general setting of the world versus this girl named Marie that he's been seeing. She had put on a white linen dress and let her hair down. I told her she was beautiful, or she was glistening all over with salty water and holding her hair back. The combined warmth from her body and the sun made me doze off. There's always a level of lightness or beauty about her that Meursault just can't get enough of. And then we see this from the setting. The matinees had all started, I guess. The only ones left were the shopkeepers and the cats. The sky was clear but dull above the fig trees lining the street. The streetcars, packed a few minutes before, were almost empty. It was Sunday, all right. Dull. D-U-L-L, dull, my bro. Of course, the setting isn't always described in this kind of dull manner. Like when he's at a beach, he describes it as beautiful, but at the end of the day, every time he's in a place, he feels alien to the people around him. It's almost like he feels like a stranger. Anyways, after attending his mother's funeral and accepting a marriage proposal kind of half-heartedly and helping his buddy Raymond deal with his cheating lover, him and Raymond get into an altercation with who they describe as Arabs. In fact, one of the altercations gets so bad that his buddy Raymond gets slashed in the face and arm, and they end up having to retreat back to the beach house. It's not long after this, however, that Meursault decides to, I don't know if it's whether out of wanting to get revenge over the Arabs slashing his buddy's face, or if he just wanted to kill a guy, he goes back to the same spot that he had the fight in, this time bringing a gun, and in a single, almost hesitant moment, he says, my whole being tense, and I squeezed my hand around the revolver. The trigger gave, and there, in that noise, sharp and deafening at the same time, is where it all started. I shook off the sweat and the sun. All right, I'm going to keep the rest of the story kind of brief, but he gets arrested. He goes to jail. But they bring up his past apathy towards his mother. It's brought up in the court dozens of times, and he's eventually found guilty. They sentence him to death by guillotine, and he spends the rest of the novel in this existential train of thought, and ultimately decides that even though life is absurd, he can still find happiness in it. All right, so that's what happens, but now I'm just going to go straight into some of my favorite quotes. At the time, I often thought that if I had to live in a tree trunk of a dead tree with nothing to do but look up at the sky flowering overhead, little by little, I would have gotten used to it. Now, as I think back on it, I wasn't in a hollow tree trunk. There were others worse off than me. Anyway, it was one of my mom's ideas, and she often repeated it, that after a while you could get used to anything. And I think that's a pretty positive message. Like, whatever, it doesn't matter what you're going through. You could be literally in a jail cell, facing death. But you can still find some respite and solace in it. Now, during the trial, Meursault constantly wants to speak and kind of share his thoughts, but his lawyer doesn't let him, basically tells him to shut up, and to which Meursault makes the following statements. In a way, they seem to be arguing the case as if it had nothing to do with me. Everything was happening without my participation. My fate was being decided without anyone so much as asking my opinion. So not only does Meursault feel like a stranger around people in general, but he also feels disconnected from his own thoughts. And really, he has no control over anything. I think it brings out the message of absurdity, and that true confinement comes from the inability of sharing one's own thoughts. All right, so that's Camus. That's The Stranger. I hope you had a good fucking day. But other than that, good night and goodbye. Hey guys, if you liked the video, hit that like.